You cannot stay here. The words were crisp, final, and laced with the kind of arrogance that only comes from people who believe they are untouchable. I stood there, suitcase in hand, dressed in designer heels and a tailored coat, blinking at the hotel receptionist as she barely concealed her smirk. I had booked the suite. I had paid in advance. Yet somehow, I was being denied entry, as if I was some random stranger off the street. That was the moment I decided, if they would not let me stay, I would make sure I owned the entire place. I have stayed in countless luxury hotels before. I know how they operate, how they treat their guests, and how they maintain a certain image. But never in my life did I expect to be humiliated like that. The moment I walked into the lobby of the Grand Orme Hotel, I felt the shift in atmosphere. It was not the usual warm, welcoming energy that high-end establishments offer their guests. Instead, there was a stiffness, an unspoken tension in the air, as if my presence had disrupted some unspoken rule. I brushed it off at first. Maybe I was overthinking it. Maybe I was just tired from the drive. The lobby itself was breathtaking. Marble floors gleamed under the chandeliers, and the scent of expensive candles filled the air. The kind of place where people whisper instead of talk. I pulled my suitcase behind me and walked up to the check-in counter, where a perfectly polished receptionist eyed me with thinly veiled disdain. "Welcome to Grand Orme," she said in a voice that was professional but cold. "How can I assist you?" I gave her my name, smiling politely. "I have a reservation for the Grand Suite. Paid in full." She typed into the computer, her expression unreadable. A few seconds passed. Then a few more. Her lips pressed together as she glanced at the screen, then at me. Something shifted in her eyes, something unpleasant. "One moment, please." She turned away and walked toward a man in a navy blue suit, standing near the back of the desk. He was obviously the manager. She whispered something to him, her eyes flicking toward me. His expression tightened. Then, with a barely perceptible sigh, he approached. "Good evening, ma'am," he said smoothly. "I am afraid there has been a mistake with your reservation." I blinked. "A mistake?" "Yes," he continued. "It appears that your booking was flagged. Unfortunately, we will not be able to accommodate you this evening." Flagged? What did that even mean? "That does not make any sense," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "I booked the Grand Suite 2 weeks ago. I have the confirmation email right here." I pulled out my phone, already scrolling through my inbox. The manager gave me a practiced smile, the kind that was meant to pacify, while simultaneously dismissing any protest. "I understand, but I am afraid the decision is final." I stared at him. "So let me get this straight. You are refusing to honor a fully paid reservation." His smile did not falter. "That is correct." A quiet, burning rage started to settle in my chest. I was not causing a scene. I was not being disruptive. There was absolutely no reason for them to treat me like this. I glanced around, noticing the other guests in the lobby. Wealthy couples dressed in understated designer outfits. Businessmen checking in without an issue. An older woman with pearl earrings being greeted with nothing but warmth from the staff. And then it hit me. This was not about a flagged reservation. This was about me. My name was not one of their regular elite clientele. I was not part of their usual crowd. And for some reason, that made me unworthy in their eyes. I felt the humiliation creep up my neck, hot and suffocating. But I refused to let them see it. Instead, I tilted my chin up and smiled at the manager. "Understood. I will be making a few phone calls. Have a great evening." I turned on my heel, walking out of that hotel as if I had not just been humiliated in front of an entire lobby of people. But the moment I stepped outside, I pulled out my phone and made the first call. To my lawyer. The cold night air hit my face as I stepped outside, but I barely felt it. My fingers tightened around my phone as I scrolled through my contacts. My heartbeat steady, but my mind racing. I had worked too hard, built too much, and come too far to be dismissed like this. I pressed the call button. "Good evening." My lawyer Ethan answered almost instantly. "Ethan, I need information on Grand Orme hotels. Who owns them? Who runs them? I want everything." There was a pause. Then in his usual measured tone he asked, "Is this about the incident you just texted me about?" "Yes." Another pause. And what exactly do you want to do? I took a deep breath. The answer was clear in my mind. I want to buy them. Ethan let out a short laugh. But when I did not join in, he cleared his throat. You are serious? Very. He sighed. All right. Give me a few hours. I will get back to you with the details. I ended the call and glanced back at the hotel entrance. Through the glass doors, I saw the manager speaking with the receptionist, both of them laughing. Probably at me. A slow, deliberate smile spread across my face. They had no idea what was coming. The next morning, Ethan called me back with a full report. The Grand Orem chain is privately owned, he explained. A family-run operation, but the majority shares belong to a single investor. Daniel Hawthorne. I recognized the name. A real estate mogul, known for his ruthlessness in business. If there was one thing I knew about men like him, it was that everything had a price. How much would it take for him to sell? I asked. That depends, Ethan said. Do you want to buy a single hotel or the entire chain? I leaned back in my chair thinking, one hotel would not be enough. No, I wanted all of them. The entire chain, I said. Ethan exhaled. All right. I will reach out and see if there is a deal to be made. 3 weeks later, I was sitting in Daniel Hawthorne's office, overlooking the city skyline. He was an older man, sharp-eyed and intimidating, but I had faced tougher opponents before. I have to admit, he said, leaning back in his leather chair. When I heard you wanted to buy Grand Orem, I was surprised. I am a woman full of surprises, I replied smoothly. He chuckled. That you are. But tell me, why this hotel chain? There are hundreds of others on the market. I could have told him the truth. That it was personal. That his employees had humiliated me, and I wanted them to know exactly who they had turned away. But instead, I gave him the answer he wanted to hear. Because it is profitable, I said. But it could be even more profitable with the right leadership. He studied me for a long moment. Then he smiled. Make me an offer. 2 months later, the papers were signed. The Grand Orem hotel chain, every single one of its properties, was officially mine. I was not a petty person, but I believed in consequences. And the moment the ink dried on those documents, I knew exactly what I was going to do next. The manager who had turned me away that night? The receptionist who had smirked at me? It was time for them to find out who they had refused service to. 2 months was a long time, but revenge, no justice, was best served cold. I did not make any grand announcements when the deal was finalized. No press releases, no sudden changes. I let the Grand Orem hotels continue operating as usual, while my transition team quietly handled the takeover behind the scenes. I wanted my first official act as the new owner to be a personal one. And that was how, on a Friday afternoon, I found myself walking back through the grand glass doors of the very same hotel that had refused to let me stay. Everything looked exactly the same. The polished marble floors, the crystal chandeliers, the faint scent of luxury perfume in the air. And behind the front desk, the same receptionist, dressed impeccably in her navy blue uniform, her expression bored as she tapped away on her keyboard. She did not recognize me at first. Welcome to Grand Orem, she said in that same detached, dismissive tone. How can I assist you? I placed my designer handbag on the counter, took off my sunglasses and smiled. I believe I have a reservation. Her eyes flicked up. And then the moment of recognition. Her fingers twitched. Oh, that was all she said. Just oh. I let the silence stretch. Let her feel the weight of it. I could see the gears turning in her head, the memory of that night flashing back. The way she had smirked at me. The way she had whispered to the manager. The way she had not even bothered to hide her disdain. I wondered if she had ever thought about it again. If she had gone home that night and laughed about it, told her friends about the woman she had turned away. If she had, she was not laughing now. I will get the manager, she stammered, already scrambling away from the desk. I folded my arms, watching as she disappeared into the back office. The tension in the room shifted. A few of the other employees glanced my way, sensing something was off. And then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw him. The manager. The same one who had looked me in the eye and told me my booking was flagged. The one who had smiled that infuriatingly condescending smile as he dismissed me. His confident stride faltered the moment he saw me standing there. Good. He composed himself quickly, fixing his tie as he approached with a tight, professional smile. Ma'am, he said cautiously. Welcome back. How can I assist you? I tilted my head. Do you not recognize me? He hesitated. Of course. We, apologize for any past inconveniences. I own this hotel now. I cut in smoothly. His mouth opened, then closed. His face went pale. The receptionist gasped. I let the words sink in. Let them fully understand. I own all of the Grand Orem hotels. I continued, my voice light, almost casual. And I have been reviewing employee records. Imagine my surprise when I saw your name. The manager swallowed hard. I can assure you, there was nothing personal about that night. It was simply a mistake, I offered. Yes, exactly, he said quickly, nodding. A misunderstanding. One that I deeply regret. I smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Regret. That is an interesting word. He straightened, trying to regain control of the situation. If there is anything I can do to make up for it. Oh, there is. I interrupted, tapping my manicured nails against the counter. I am making some policy changes. And unfortunately, they involve a complete restructuring of the management team. His face crumpled. Wait. You are fired. He looked like I had slapped him. You cannot. I can. And I have. He turned to the receptionist, who was now trembling behind the desk. And what about her? He asked desperately. I glanced at her. She shrank under my gaze. I will think about it, I said, dismissing her. The manager tried to argue, but security had already been notified. 2 guards arrived, standing behind him, waiting for my command. I nodded. Escort him out. And just like that, the man who had so confidently denied me service was now being led out of the building, his protests fading into the background. I exhaled slowly, feeling the weight of everything settle in. This was not just about firing one man. This was about changing the culture of this hotel chain. And this was just the beginning. The moment the doors shut behind the former manager, a thick silence settled over the lobby. The employees, the guests, even the concierge, all of them had been watching. Some with shock, some with curiosity, and a few with the kind of quiet satisfaction that told me they had probably endured their own encounters with the now-fired manager. I turned back to the receptionist, who looked like she wanted to disappear. What is your name? I asked. She swallowed hard. Sophie, she said quietly. I nodded. Sophie, how long have you worked here? 3 years, she answered, eyes darting between me and the front desk computer as if trying to avoid my gaze. I leaned on the counter. Be honest with me. That night, when you whispered to him before I was turned away, was that your decision, or was it his? Her hands clenched at her sides. For a moment, I thought she would lie, but then in a barely audible voice she said his. I studied her. I had seen people like her before. People who went along with power plays, not because they enjoyed them, but because they feared the consequences of doing anything else. Do you like working here, Sophie? I asked. She hesitated. Then finally she shook her head. No. I nodded again, thinking. I will not fire you, I said. Her head snapped up in surprise. But I will be making changes. A lot of them. And you will have a choice. You can stay and be part of that change, or you can leave with severance. It is up to you. She blinked, as if trying to process my words. Then slowly she nodded. I would like to stay. Good. I straightened up. Then you can start by assisting me with my check-in. I believe I booked the grand suite. The tension in her shoulders eased, and she quickly typed into the system. Yes, ma'am. Welcome to Grand Orem. This time, the words sounded genuine. Over the next several weeks, I made good on my promise. The entire corporate structure of Grand Orem hotels underwent an overhaul. Every regional manager was reviewed. Anyone who had encouraged the toxic elitist behavior that had trickled down through their staff was replaced. I implemented new training programs. Hospitality was about service, not snobbery. No guest would be judged based on their appearance, their last name, or their connections. If someone had the means to stay at our hotels, they deserved the luxury experience they were paying for, without humiliation attached. Word spread quickly. Some of the old employees, Those who had looked down on guests they deemed unworthy quit rather than adapt. But others, like Sophie, stayed. Some even thrived under the new system. The results spoke for themselves. Bookings increased. Customer satisfaction ratings soared. Grand Orem hotels went from being a place where only certain people felt welcome to a brand that everyone wanted to experience. And the best part, the very people who had once dismissed me as not their type of guest were now working under my policies. It was the kind of justice money could buy. A few months after the takeover, I walked into the Grand Orem Hotel again. Not as an outsider, not as an unrecognized guest, but as the woman who owned it all. The transformation was undeniable. The energy in the lobby was different. The staff stood taller, their smiles more genuine. The artificial pretentiousness that had once hung in the air like overpriced perfume was gone. In its place was something far more valuable: respect. I was making my usual rounds when I noticed Sophie at the front desk. She was training a new receptionist, patiently explaining the reservation system. When she saw me, she smiled. An actual warm smile, not the forced customer service expression she used to wear. "Good afternoon, Miss Carter," she greeted me. "Here for your usual inspection?" I smiled back. Something like that. The new receptionist, a young man who looked barely out of college, turned to me with wide eyes. "You are Miss Carter?" he asked, as if he had just spotted a celebrity. "Wow, it is an honor to meet you. I heard the whole story, how you turned this place around." I raised an eyebrow at Sophie. "Telling stories about me, are we?" She laughed. "Only the good parts." The young man grinned. "Honestly, I think what you did was amazing. I mean, buying an entire hotel chain, just because they treated you badly? That is legendary." I tilted my head, considering his words. "People like to think it was about revenge," I said finally. "And in the beginning, maybe it was. But it became more than that. The truth was, if I had only wanted revenge, I could have just fired a few people and walked away satisfied. But something deeper had driven me to see this through. It was about proving a point. It was about changing the rules of a game that had always favored the same kind of people. The ones who assumed power belonged only to them. And most of all, it was about legacy. Because years from now, when people talked about Grand Orem hotels, they would not remember the old management. They would remember the woman who took what was once an exclusive, snobbish empire and turned it into something better. Something fair. Sophie interrupted my thoughts. "Would you like me to book you a suite for the night?" she asked. I thought about it for a moment, then shook my head. "No need. I already have a home here." And for the first time, I truly felt like I belonged. Looking back, I do not regret a single step of this journey. The old me, the one who stood outside that hotel months ago, humiliated and dismissed, would never have imagined that this was how things would turn out. But sometimes, the universe hands you an opportunity disguised as an insult. I just happened to be the kind of person who knew exactly what to do with it. And that is how you turn rejection into power.